Good evening and welcome to Territories Talk. Chris, over to you.
Yes, good evening and welcome to our hundreds of viewers around the region and around the diaspora. We have a very special and informative episode of Decolonization for today, February 23rd. We want to thank our media partners for around the region because without them, this will not be broadcast. So we also have a new media partner that we will be announcing. So let's start off. We have ZJB Radio in Montserrat. We have PJFE Radio in Saba, which is Dutch Caribbean. We have CBN Radio in the Virgin Islands. We have Cayman Marl in the Cayman Islands, obviously. Channel 82 in Bermuda. And now our newest partner, who will be broadcasting as of March, will be Radio Turks and Caicos Island. I think someone here knows a little bit about Turks and Caicos Island. But suffice it to say, we thank you. Without you, this is the ethos of the show of bringing the Caribbean together. So we're going to go to a little positive news segment, and then we'll go right into our guests.
Okay.
So starting off in Bermuda, we have Bermudian Janai Parent Chief, who's now ranked as the world's top triple jumper. I think one of our guests knows a little bit about track and field, but we'll get into that later. So congratulations to Janai Parent Chief. Now moving on to Montserrat. I think someone knows about Montserrat. The government of Montserrat was pleased to announce that they are now starting a port development project, and they actually have a contractor from the British Virgin Islands.
Yes.
So that will allow for larger ships and more secure transportation to and from Montserrat. And finally, in Turks and Caicos Island, Premier Washington Missick and his government are now increasing the communications with the people so the people of Turks and Caicos Island and the region can find out more about the wonderful work that his government is doing. So that's our positive news for this week's episode. Now, on to our guests. Tonight, whenever you're watching this, we have two former premiers of overseas territories. These men have led their countries with distinction, honor, and set the pace. And one of them I can proudly say is a personal mentor of mine. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Ewart Brown. Born in Bermuda to Ewart Sr. and Miss Helene Brown. He was educated at the Berkeley Institute and Howard University, where he did some rather extraordinary things at the real HU. I'll let him talk about that later on. And also at the University of California, where he got his medical degree. He has been a practicing medical practitioner, that's probably a double standard, for the last 50 odd years. Correct, sir?
40.
On the political side, he was first elected to Parliament in Bermuda in 1993. He served in the opposition for 5 years, and then in 1998, our party became successful at the polls for the first time ever. And he was one of those who helped to stir that campaign, if I'm correct. Yes. And from 1998, he served as distinction as a Minister of Transport, a Minister of Tourism. He's on his guidance, we saw some of our largest increases, record-breaking numbers in 2007, I believe. At one point, there was we had two airlines coming in from England, Zoom, I think it's called Zoom, and British Airways. And there was a joke one day where Zoom actually competed and had the same number of persons minus one of British Airways. So we had extra thing. Also under his leadership, we got our fast ferries, which aided in our transportation system. In 2006, he became the premier of Bermuda. His term lasted for 4 years. He set his end term. And in 2007, he led our party, Progressive Labour Party, to his third consecutive win. Correct, sir?
That's correct.
He is also director of Bermuda Healthcare, Brown Darrow Clinic, is a father of 4 sons, married to a wonderful lady, Mrs. Wanda Hinton Brown, and now the grandfather of 2 grandchildren.
Four.
Sorry, 4 grandchildren. Sorry, I got it wrong.
That's okay.
There's so much more I can say. His healthcare foundation, they provide scholarships for young persons. They provide turkeys for the general public, and most Bermudians put their health in his care because he is a trusted physician, and that is Dr. Ewart F. Brown Jr. Correct, sir?
Thank you very much.
That's it off the top of my head.
All right.
And now we have the Honorable Donaldson Romeo, also known as Premier Romeo. Excuse me, sir, did you buy that name?
Not yet.
Romeo. Mr. Romeo, Premier Romeo was born in Salem, Montserrat. He attended Montserrat Secondary School, Salem Primary School, George School in Pennsylvania, Temple University, and then on to University in London. Whilst in London, the British government decided that they wanted to do some unfair things and try to deport him. Can you imagine deporting a man out of a country that we built? There and then, Premier Romeo wasn't premier at that time, but that's when he became an activist, and he gathered up support from persons in the Labour government, the Labour Party, I should say, and went around and got support from so many persons. And he defeated that deportation order. Correct, sir?
That is correct. So I'll correct one thing later.
Okay.
Go ahead.
He then returned home in 1988. And as we would all know, we were in Montserrat was struck by Hurricane Hugo in 1989, which caused sort of a setback for his family business. Well, the entire region, really. Then in 1995, calamity with a volcano. And 2/3 of the island was left uninhabitable. So what did what did Mr. Romeo do? He and others lobbied the British for better housing for their people, for aid, and so on. In 2009, he became an independent MP. Correct, sir? Hello?
That's correct.
That's correct. Just off the top of my head.
That's correct, yes.
And in 2004, and he became opposition leader of the PDM. I'll let him explain what PDM means, People's Democratic Movement.
I became opposition leader as an independent candidate, and later led the PDM party. Okay. Well, you have to explain that because that's a slightly different configuration than how we do things in Bermuda. In 2008, he became premier. 2014 became premier. 14.
Yes,
2014.
Became premier in 2014. And during his tenure as premier, he did great work for Montserrat by lobbying the United Nations for direct aid. He also lobbied them to have the C24, which is the Committee for Decolonization, to come to Montserrat and also to set a timetable for Montserrat to get its full decolonization. 2019, he became an independent MP once again and won his third consecutive term, in which he is still a sitting member of parliament in the House of Parliament, or the legislature of Montserrat. All off the top of my head. I may have forgot something.
Well, just two things I need to correct. First, I didn't attend university in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
When I went to the United Kingdom, I became a self-taught portrait artist. And the other thing is, in 2009, I was first elected as an independent candidate. There were 3 independent candidates in the opposition at the time. I became the leader of the opposition as a result. And in 2014 is when I led the PDM party and became premier.
Okay, my apologies. I was remembering your bios off the top of my head. So excuse me. So without further ado, we are going to talk about decolonization. And I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Braun. In your mind and your heart, why do we need to be initially discussing decolonization?
Well, thank you, Chris, and thanks to everyone on the program and the listeners. Let me say that I am embarrassed, quite honestly, on behalf of all of us, that in 2022, we are still even discussing something as basic as self-determination. So I am a clear advocate of the full development of people's potential. And I think that colonization is a blockade to that development.
Okay, thank you. Premier Romeo, why do we need to be discussing decolonization?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
No, the question was why
I didn't hear
in the year.
Could you repeat, please?
No, I'm asking why in the year 2022 do we need to be discussing decolonization?
That's a very good question, because it's probably the 3rd or 4th decade that we are discussing eliminating the colonies from throughout the world. And I think it's a combination of reasons. There are a combination of reasons. That some people don't want to be decolonized, that's one. And some don't understand what it really means. And also, lastly, I think we're not taking the initiative we need to take to bring about decolonization. And it's sometimes a combination of all 3.
All right. So back to you, Dr. Braun. What would you say during your tenure that you did towards helping steer persons towards decolonization?
Well, first of all, our emphasis, as opposed to being on a direct independence campaign, our emphasis was on critical thinking and fearless politics, to show our people that the concept of colonization should be resisted. Because I believe that one of the reasons, and Premier Romeo touched on it, is that some of our people say that they don't want to be free of that burden of colonization. And I submit that that is an unnatural position. It's like people saying, I don't want to drink water. I don't want any of your oxygen. You know, I think that is because they don't know the wealth of it, the worth of it, and the strength of it. And so I believe that what we tried to do was to indicate to people that these forces that were keeping us colonized are not invincible, that they can be defeated, and that we should demonstrate from time to time that we will resist the whole concept of being colonized. In my personal situation, of course, I've paid the price and still paying the price for trying to demonstrate that we can do things on our own. You might recall that in 2009, my government allowed, at the request of the Obama administration, 4 inmates from Guantanamo to relocate to Bermuda. We thought that it was a very humanitarian act and something for which Bermuda had been respected around the world, hospitality. However, it turned out that we did that without seeking the permission of the UK. And
was that oversight on your part, sir?
No, sir. It was done. It was done with a clear mind and a clear heart. That I wanted people to know that we were able to make that decision. And in fact, time has proven that the decision was fine. The 4 Uyghurs relocated to Bermuda. They haven't had any incidents, any problems. And so we're very proud of having made that decision. Now, the UK had another way of thinking, that they are going to punish me personally for having done that. And so for the last 12 years almost, I've been living with the legal cloud over my head, having been charged with trumped up charges that don't mean anything.
Thank you for that. We'll get back to that in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Premier Romeo, during your time as Premier, what steps did you take to educate your people about decolonization?
Well, first, I must explain why the UN became very important to me, the UN Committee for Decolonization. First, the leader before me actually requested that Montserrat be removed from the list of territories that were to be decolonized. So first, I had to go to the UN and let them know that as leader, I want to make sure that Montserrat was placed on the list so that we could take it about being a territory that needs colonized. Then, if you are aware of Montserrat, for 25 years, 26 now, we've been trying to get out of the situation we've had 8 leaders trying to keep our people on island from leaving and going to Britain, trying to make sure we get the key infrastructure we need.
I think there's a little problem. Yeah, until we get Dr. Romeo back. Over to you, Shaina.
Okay.
Infrastructure, which is a port to agree to provide. Were you hearing me? We're having difficulties here?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You were frozen before,
Okay.
so you'll have to start over.
You were saying that for 26 years you were trying to do something?
To get out of the dreaded state of trying to recover from volcanic eruptions, trying to keep our people stable, trying to build housing for those who are evacuees. At the start of the crisis, we lost 3/4 of our population because, I must say, of the neglect from the British government in providing housing in a timely manner, from even providing basic food and proper shelter to those who evacuated. Over 6,000.
Could you elaborate that
on? What's that?
May you elaborate on that neglect from the British force, please?
I'm sorry, we're having difficulty. I'm not hearing you.
No, I'm saying, can you hear me now?
I think he has a delay.
Well, that is exactly the reason why I became an activist.
Okay.
Yes. If I go back to, I'm sorry, we're having difficulty breaking up. If I go back to when I was an activist, the reason why I became an activist at the beginning in 1995 is after visiting shelters, they were so overcrowded and inhumane to be part of the fight to get the British government and the issues of those staying in the shelters. And just imagine, within 2 years, the volcano erupted seriously, killing 13 or 14 people, all because of neglect, because of not informing the people properly of the dangers of the volcano, not providing housing in a timely manner. Some returned to their homes because the conditions in the shelters were so terrible. Some farmers went to produce food, which they were selling to the government. It was a mess. In the end, after 13 persons got killed on June 25th, we had a mass depopulation taking place. More than 3/4 of our population within a matter of 3 years had left, mainly for the United Kingdom. So the remaining population have since then been struggling to influence the British government to provide the basic facilities we lost to the volcano. We lost our port that was just built. We lost our government headquarters. We lost a free, up-to-date hospital. We lost our hotels, our main hotels. We lost our golf course. We lost our schools, 3/4 of our schools. We lost anything that was very important to us, having a very viable economy. So here we were on the other side of the island, 1/3 of the island, continually reckoning with the British government to address our very basic needs, our development needs and our basic needs, our urgent needs as well as our long-term needs. And it has taken 8 leaders in 25 years. Not one leader has repeated a term. It's been so difficult enough to convince the public to have them eat. So here we are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, breaking up. Just break up again.
Okay. So here we were. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Can
Just
you hear me?
freezing up a little bit.
I'm afraid we're... Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so in 2014, when I got in as premier, we had that same task. And towards the end of my interaction with the UN, helped me to understand that my greatest means of influence was working through the United Nations. That platform allowed me to influence the British government to do what we needed. And that is where I became very involved in educating myself on the importance of working with the UNC24 committee, the G4th committee, and of course, towards the end of my term in 2019, I made a request to the 4th committee for the full decolonization of Montserrat. In that, I asked for there to be put a proposal by the government of Montserrat, United Nations,
All right, Shaina, let's go to our.
and I'm not sure if I'm connected.
So, Premier Romeo, I think if it's possible for you to log on a different device, because what's happening is you're freezing up. So your audio is dropping out. So that we can hear you much clearer.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting in and out. I'm missing you. So
yeah, is it possible? Oh goodness, no, he's gone. Oh, there you are.
That looks a lot better.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
During my very last year, I made a request for the decolonization of Montserrat. That's where I realized the reason why we were not achieving decolonization is because we were not using UN committee. So in making that request, it meant that what we've been working towards for the past 26 years would be possible with the help of the United Nations by negotiating for a proper port, for a proper hospital, and the works. So for us, decolonization means getting the important infrastructure, getting, as you've mentioned, us developed socially and economically to the point where we can make the decision about independence. But there would be a process of providing us what we needed as far as infrastructure and as far as economic development and with our governance to get to the point where we can make that decision whether we want to be independent or what are the other two choices were.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to our quick identification with our media partners.
All right, let's bring them up.
Yeah, so once again, thank you to our media partners throughout the region: ZJB Radio in Montserrat, PJFE in Saba, CBN Radio in the Virgin Islands, Cayman Marl in Cayman Islands, Channel 82 here in Bermuda, and as of next month, Radio Turks and Caicos Island. Thank you, Shaina.
Awesome. All right.
So, Dr. Brown,
Yeah.
your predecessor, Premier Alex Scott, under his leadership, there was a Bermuda Independent. I forgot the exact name, but there was a report commission,
Mm-hmm.
which actually did the logistics of our island going independent. Whilst he was the premier, out of that report, what did you find interesting that could have been to the people?
Well, the most interesting thing to me was the vast number of people who were opposed to independence regardless. And I think that's why Premier Scott didn't take it to the people again, as Premier Swan had done some years prior. It proved to be a disappointment that Bermuda, which has not depended on the UK for financial support for many, many, many years, found itself still stymied, this time by the fact that some people, the majority of the people, felt that it wasn't broken, so there was no need to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and of course, that had something to do with how my administration handled the whole issue, because there was a fresh piece of negative information all in the mix when we came on the scene. It didn't make sense to come back and repeat that exercise. So what we decided to do was, as I said earlier, we decided to try to lead by example, you know, to show that we could manage our own affairs, that we were no longer children, and that as adults, we could conduct our own business. And we believe that. We believe that today.
Thank you. And so why do you believe, beyond the obvious, why do you believe so high of a proportion of Bermudians are, for lack of a better term, anti-independence?
Well, I'll give you a story, if you will bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
In 1979, I had a conversation with Robert Nesta Marley. I was trying to convince him to come to Jamaica.
Would that be Bob Marley?
Yes.
Okay.
I was talking with him to try to convince him to come to Bermuda to perform, because he had a strong following in Bermuda, as you know, and I wanted Bermudians to have the benefit of seeing him in a live performance.
Mm-hmm.
We had a long discussion. He was reluctant to come. And I was describing to him the economic situation in Bermuda and that there was some stability economically, et cetera, et cetera. He said, "But Doc, the people are passive."
Mm.
I said, "Yes, I understand. And they've been made that way. They weren't born that way." So when I was ending the conversation with him, I began to walk away, having not convinced him. And he shouted out to me, he said, "Doc, remember, a full belly make a weak revolutionary."
Mm-hmm.
I never forgot those words, because it should teach a lesson to those territories that believe that first they must get economic stability, and then they will they can seek political self-determination. And I'm telling you, I'm here to say, as a part of the Bermudian landscape, that it didn't work that way for us. That the more comfort and stability people have in a situation, the less likely they are to change that situation.
I see. Thank you. Because the thing is that, as we all know, the minute you say the I word, people say, "Oh, look at Jamaica. Oh, look at Haiti. Oh, look at." They always point to the negatives, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what I find ironic in Bermuda is that every 4th of July, Bermudians will be the first ones. Black Bermudians will be the first ones putting on something red, white, and blue to celebrate 4th of July.
Yes.
And you say to them, "Do you understand what that is?" "Oh, it's Independence Day." So you're celebrating America's independence, but it's good for them to get away from the British, but it's not good for us.
Not good for you. You know, I have to tell you one short story is that I was 11 years old when my uncle, W.G. Brown, went to the United Nations, as Premier Donaldson has done, and pressed the case for Bermuda to be decolonized. Gentlemen and lady, that was 65 years ago. So that has been the history. When Bermuda had a hurricane in 2003, Hurricane Fabian, which destroyed a good bit of the island, not as bad as the case was in Montserrat, but when the Brits called and asked us if we needed help, and we said yes, we could use some help, what was offered were cots and blankets in the middle of August. And so we told them keep sailing.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you for that, Dr. Brown. Premier Romeo. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, in your experience, why do you think Montserratians were reluctant or are reluctant to go independent?
For the very same reason mentioned by our colleague there. Prior to the volcano, our people would always compare ourselves to Antigua and to Jamaica and other countries who they see as having struggles with independence. Also, we were doing quite well. In the late 70s and 80s, we were basically ahead of the Virgin Islands in a sense. So we felt comfortable with how we were. And there was also a fear of corruption taking over a small territory in the politics and in the legal system. But, the strange thing is that, I'm going to give an example. Since the volcano hit, of course, we will become 60% dependent on the British government for aid to provide our services. So under those circumstances, absolutely no one wants to talk of independence. And strange enough, just yesterday, a lady said to me, "Why don't we become fully part of Britain?" And I'm sure if I asked her, what does that mean? She wouldn't know. So most people don't even understand what the choices, what the options are. And that's why I stick to the argument of providing us the key infrastructure, providing the development we need over a period of time, that the British government provides the funding to assist and the resources, that the United Nations assist us with the expertise that we need to put a proper plan in place to grow our economy to the point where we can stand on our own 2 feet out of dependence on the British government, and then make the decision as to whether we want to be independent, whether we want to be an associated state, or whether we want it to be fully integrated. So I avoided the entire argument about independence and stuck to the issue of getting what we needed to stand on our own 2 feet. And I found that that works, because once you start talking about independence, you end up in an internal battle that leads to nowhere.
Okay, thank you. So over
Chris,
to you.
can I jump in there? We have some comments coming in. I'd like to get some reaction from our guests. So yeah, we have a few comments. So someone said, I'll pull up the comment. We should be fighting for equal rights as British citizens and not independence. This is for anyone on the panel in terms of your thoughts on this and why that, where your position is versus what this person is saying.
Well, I always tell people that if they had the solution, if I had the solution, they wouldn't have the problem. So I don't claim to have the answer for every situation here. But I just cannot understand. I have studied four-legged animals, birds, And they all seem to, at first, stay with their mother in a very nurturing situation. But at some point, they make a decision to leave and to try life on their own terms. And I see that as a lesson, a message from nature, that it is natural for one to seek to stand on one's own 2 feet. And I just don't understand. I mean, I can understand if you don't do it because you may be afraid of A, B, and C, but I don't understand the idea of not wanting it. I don't understand that. I really don't. So Elroy, we agree to disagree.
And one of the things for me, even with this statement, like from Romeo was just saying, some people don't understand what it means to have equal rights as a British citizen. Because then the argument, and I think this came up in a previous episode, of the fact that the Foreign Affairs Committee in the UK Parliament has already started lobbying for us to basically abolish belonger status, so that British citizens from immigration
giving us certain latitude and giving us space and certain privileges and whatever. But those things are given to you. That's not quite self-determination.
Okay. And Premier, anything to chime in on that one? I also have another comment that I want to bring up.
Actually, I think we are in an advantageous position in a sense, in that at present, Montserrat, for instance, we cannot, the British government, or sorry, I put it the other way, British citizens cannot come to Montserrat and start a business without us giving them permission. They can't come to Montserrat, and they can vote after a certain amount of time. But we can go to Britain and start a business. We can go to Britain and live, and we have a right of abode. So we have one advantage there. Montserrat situation, I will argue that we do have a right to be treated equally. Under UN law, it speaks to the British government have a responsibility to treating us, providing for us to the uttermost. I'm sorry, I can't quote it exactly. And what that means is to the best of their ability. When in our situation in Montserrat, we need assistance with COVID-related matters, they should be treating us equally to how they treat their citizens in the United Kingdom. Why?
There's no question. There's no question,
Yes.
Premier Romeo. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. So we do have rights that we're not exercising right now.
Well, we have rights as human beings all over the planet, no matter where we are, to be treated equally as humans. We know that. But as I've told my friends often, I've never seen a flow chart that didn't work. All flow charts are perfect. You know, oh, yes, we'll give you equal rights. It's okay to say that and to quote the Bible about how we're all equal. But when it comes to the day in and day out treatment of Black people on the planet, that doesn't happen.
But I do think that the right to self-determination, equal rights, are God-given rights.
Yes, they
should
should
be.
be.
God gives you rights.
Right.
He will provide a way for us to
right.
attain those rights. And what we tend to do is be discouraged about fighting for them. But
Yes.
I'm convinced that once a country like Montserrat or Bermuda, whoever, once their leaders, political leaders, and the people are prepared to do what's right. You know, I don't want to quote the Bible too much, but I think it's important for us to understand what it means about righteousness exalting a nation. And over the past few weeks, I've realized it's just about doing things right. If our governments and our people were determined to do what's right, God will protect us. God will give us the sort of sovereignty we need to maintain our culture, to maintain our way of living. And as a Black people, stand on our own 2 feet. And that is why I think there's a spiritual side to our quest that cannot be ignored. We have rights, and they're God-given, and He has given us the willpower if we choose.
Right.
And He will provide a way. And that is why people like Martin Luther King had success. That is why Mandela had success, because he stood up and was counted on matters that he demanded to be his rights.
Well, I don't want to be quoting the Bible too much either, but I will say,
guys, let me interject really quickly. We just lost our Facebook feed, so I need to reset because our YouTube followers are following us, but we lost a part of our audience on our Facebook pages. Give me 1 minute. Let me get, because you guys are getting into a very good conversation here, and I want to make sure everyone is getting is able to get it. Okay, so let me. I think the best thing